NATO, in Africa, or in ECOWAS, who is going to bail the cat financially, so to speak? To me, these are the practical issues that you will have to deal with to have an effective military standing force that can then be anti-coup d'etat.
Thank you, sir. I can see a question here that says, what is the place of good governance and appropriate institutional structures in ensuring that the population has confidence in the government in Africa? I am not sure we can remove good governance from the anti-coup program in Africa. Do you want to respond to that, sir?
Yes. I am not removing good governance. That's why I said part of the raison d'etre of a standing force will be against civilian coup d'etat. But this gives me then an opportunity to spell it out. There is going to have to be good governance, and good governance is going to mean economic development, anti-corruption. But then, you know, when you start talking now about economic development, it has to operate on two levels. One, government itself must be seen to make sacrifices when it calls on its people to make sacrifices. That's the number one. It must be visible. You don't ask your people to make economic sacrifices while government officials, from the president to the National Assembly, are swimming in financial opulence. You can't. And then on the other hand, people must believe and must understand that the relationship between economic development and economic policies is the relationship between being pregnant and having a baby. 9 months. Nature has been teaching us a lesson. Not 1 month, not 2 months, 9 months. Therefore, if you put a policy in place today, don't expect that next week or week after there would be visible results. Of course, you know, this economics and financial management can, if you like, be programmed to have, say, immediate results, intermediate results, and long-term results. Let me go back to my analogy about pregnancy. Of course, immediate results. The lady will know within 1 month that she's pregnant, and there will be evidence of it, medical evidence of it. And intermediate results will be the changes in the lady's figure. And then the long-term results will be the baby the childbirth in 9 months. So to go back then to our economic paradigm, there are what can we call it, palliatives that you could put immediately in place. You remove subsidy. Within 2 weeks, you can also remove, say, tuition payments from private primary school, from government primary school, government secondary school, and the tertiary institutions. Remove tuition fees. And since federal government or national government seldom have primary schools, those are usually state and local government. It's going to mean, if you like, transfer of funds, immediate transfer of funds from federal government to state government and local government. Now, you might say, where would these funds come from? Actually, when you immediate removal of subsidy will be reflected in the amount of money saved, as we have just seen, where money that has gone into federation account in Nigeria has increased exponentially, to show that money saved from subsidy is already coming into the federation account. So you can immediately, the woman selling vegetables beside the road probably has a child or two in primary school, that if you remove tuition from her, she immediately sees a correlation between removal of subsidy and removal or alleviation of her own burden. So that way, good governance is immediate. She could see evidence of it. And then, of course, the middle palliatives, will be reflected in probably within 3 months. Road development, repair of roads, and all those kind of things. It may even involve government slashing the salaries of government officials by whatever percentage they can work out. It may even, because it happened in Senegal, where the two-chamber legislature was reduced to one-chamber legislature in order to save funds. So these are things that will involve will involve evidence of good governance.
Thank you, sir. I want to pick on one point you raised there in terms of the unity of Africa and how the African Union and African leaders could pose a formidable deterrent against coups. But talking about the unity of Africa, I want to go to the planned summit that's happening with Russia later on in the year, where last time that summit held, there were about 43 African leaders there. Now, it's been said that there would only be 17 African leaders that would be attending the summit later on in the year.
I'm sorry. The summit is holding on right now, and there are only 17 leaders present. So not later in the year. It's happening right now in St. Petersburg.
Sorry, I missed that. Apologies for that. What signal is that sending to Russia, sir?
The timing is wrong. I believe that this year, because of the war going on between Russia and Ukraine, that summit should have been postponed. Russia itself can see the impact of that war. 43 leaders in 2019, I believe, and now 17 leaders now. The rest are when they are represented at ambassadorial or government official level. Timing is wrong. Number two, you are putting considerable pressure on African countries. You may not mean it. However, international observers will be coming to their own conclusion. African leaders who turn up in St. Petersburg are now really going to be portrayed as being pro-Russian leaders, even when they don't want to be portrayed as such, and when they don't mean to be seen as Russian leaders, they will be portrayed. Those who do not show up at presidential level will be portrayed now as anti-Russia, even if that is not their intention. Flying into St. Petersburg is actually not the most safe venture to go into, because recall that actually a Korean plane, I believe, was shot down over the territory of Ukraine occupied by pro-Russian forces, and everybody on the plane died. It was a passenger plane several years ago. So it's not something that I even believe you should risk. Thirdly, or fourthly, Russia had just pulled out of the Green Deal. Now, I always say that our podcast is the voice of the global South to the world. And therefore, we are immune from propaganda. The propaganda that is on the Western media is that, oh, this is an anti-African move by Russia. Africa is going to suffer from a shortage of wheat, high price of bread, poverty, hunger, etc., etc. What they are not emphasizing is Russia saying that it agreed to the deal originally because it believed that majority of the wheat was going to go to the global South, to Africa. Whereas when the Ukrainian ships started flowing out, the ships were going to feed the global North. And that the perception of Russia then was that it was allowing people who had imposed sanctions on her to be fed through her own policy. This we are not getting from those who monitor Western media. So Russia now is saying they will find ways and means of sending, that they also produce wheat, they produce barley, and that they will make this available to Africa. How they are going to do this when Ukraine has said that it will target ships leaving Russian harbor going out, just as Russia has said it will target ships leaving Ukrainian harbor. It's a messy situation, and I don't think African nations really want to be caught in the middle between, on one hand, Russia and Ukraine, and on the other hand, between Russia and the Western Alliance. I think an evaluation of all of this has reflected itself in the number of 17 African leaders that have shown up. Frankly, if I were Russia, I would have, I think justifiably, I would have postponed this year's African Russian summit. Having said that, let me also say, and I'm on record as saying, I am dead opposed to this virus that has crept into the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world, where we are summoned as Africa. So you have Russia African Summit, you have Japanese African Summit, you have Chinese African Summit, you even have Turkey African Summit. Excuse me, where is this going to get us? Before you know it, we will be summoned by the who? Pakistan African Summit. We will be summoned by Belarusia African Summit, and we will all go there. I haven't heard of African American Summit to be held in Africa. If we are going to adopt this style, this is going to be part of international affairs, then let us work it out that this year we hold it in the global north, next year we hold it in Africa. If we hold it in Washington 1 year, the next American African Summit will be held in Africa. We've held Russia now this year. The next Russian African Summit will be held in a country in Africa. Then let us, because this one now looks like master-slave relationship. The master is summoning you and not our leaders who have reasons, probably have reasons to run away from their countries, drop whatever they are doing and head straight for wherever they've been summoned to. It rubs me the wrong way. And I think our leaders really, probably at the level of African Union, should take a decision on this matter, that this is the format that they want to adopt. 1 year in Moscow or St. Petersburg, the following year in Africa. 1 year in Istanbul, Turkey, the following year in Africa. 1 year in Tokyo, the following year in Africa, etc.
Let's talk about BRICS a little bit, sir, because the Russian space organization is enticing Africa by suggesting that members of BRICS could have a module in their new space station that they're going to be building. And the fact that the current International Space Station agreement with the US is going to come to an end, Russia is going to build their own, and they're offering BRICS members. How do you react to that information, sir?
Well, I mean, this is the kind of thing I like. If we are going to have a relationship with you, what do we get out of it? What is the benefit to us out of that? And the benefit must be substantial, something that will actually serve African interests. And I think that Russia has been clever in this, in now making an offer making an offer that will be substantially, even if it's soft diplomacy, even if you claim that what will African astronauts, be gaining from there is part of soft diplomacy. This is not targeting the Chinese who have a model of their own. This is not targeting India, because India actually has a substantive advanced space program. Let us call a spade by its name. This is targeting Brazil and South Africa. And whoever will be the new leaders or the new members of BRICS who may come on board in next month's BRICS summit in South Africa. So really, I like the model that the Russians have put out. This we have to offer you. Nobody is offering this to you, and therefore, there is a positive, beneficial, beneficial ingredient to your membership of BRICS.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to come back to a question that someone, or a comment someone has posted. But before I do that, there was a piece of news I saw earlier on in the week, sir. And that's the fact about NATO was going to be boosting surveillance around the Black Sea. But what really caught my attention was a comment made, sir, where they talked about a group that or a coming together that I hadn't seen before. They called it the Ukraine NATO Council, and that was formed last month in a meeting, and they had a meeting in Brussels. And is this a way of getting Ukraine into NATO through the back door?
You'll recall that at the last meeting of NATO held at the summit level, the issue of Ukraine's membership of NATO was hotly debated. Some members of NATO were in favor of admitting Ukraine right away, irrespective of the legal, the legal stumble block that was there, which Biden raised, that you cannot admit a country that was in the middle of a war, because that will automatically activate Article 5 of NATO. And so to that extent, the United States was opposed to Ukrainian membership. That's when they then came up with this formula of having a NATO Ukrainian Council. So it's neither fish nor fowl. It's not Ukrainian membership of NATO, but it also has NATO in by the nose, while the rest of the body is outside. Let us hope that this is not a case of some story that I read somewhere, where a man came down from his camel and built his tent, and because it was cold outside, it allowed the camel to put his nose into the tent to keep it warm. After a while, the camel put his head inside. After a while, two of his legs and the hump came inside. And before you know it, the whole camel was inside the tent and the owner was outside the tent. So, but it's a measure of appeasing Ukraine without activating Article 5. It's just to get around that legal hump that the United States was afraid of crossing that line. But it came into being at the last NATO summit.
Thank you, sir. There's a comment from, I believe this is Ambassador Igali. Again, please bear with me if I don't get the pronunciations or the names right. But the comment he's making here, if I can summarize this briefly, is that the countries in the Sahel cannot be completely detached from the state of hunger and poverty, and that the absence of these basic existential conditions is compounding security in the area, and that a country like Nigeria should be using all diplomatic means, including non-traditional back channels, to stave off the type of development around our own backyard. I don't know if you want to respond to that, if you concur with that comment, sir.
Yes, yes. Ambassador Igali is quite right. Let me go back historically a few years back when Nigeria and Cuba, when President Shagari was in power, had negotiated the deal where Cuba was going to come and develop a wheat plantation in the Sokoto Basin area that will have made Nigeria not only self-sufficient in wheat, but will have also made Nigeria a wheat exporter. As soon as the United States got wind of the deal, they sent a high-powered delegation to Shagari to say, to make him an offer. If you cancel the deal with Cuba, we will come and build or plant this wheat plantation for Nigeria. Of course, with some pressure on Shagari, he canceled the deal, and the Americans never showed up till today. So the lesson is probably beware of promises made to you which may not be fulfilled. Second lesson, whether Russia goes into a new wheat deal or not, hopefully the African, Exim Bank, in collaboration with the African Development Bank, I know they're planning, agricultural projects, but let this now come onto the front burner in terms of making Africa self-sufficient, food-wise, because we don't want to get caught in a conflict that is not of our own doing, but then we now suffer from the consequences of it. It allows us to be blackmailed. It allows pressure to be put upon us. And this wheat deal is one of such. So I do agree with Ambassador Igali. It's too late to save ourselves from the immediate consequence of the failure of the wheat deal, but we can start planning for the future. And I think we now have the institutions, these two financial institutions that I have mentioned, maybe in their next meeting with the African Union, who actually put this in place, identify what goods, what agricultural goods they would like to finance, in what countries, in what areas, and let us get on with it.
Let me go to China very quickly, sir, and let's look at the stance that China has taken by replacing their foreign secretary or foreign minister with someone, Wang Yi, who analysts believes is a well-known hand. Um, what is your take on the implications for China-US relations, given that Wang Yi has been known for his sharp intellect and really holding positions that support the Chinese views and not as liberal in some cases? What is your take on the signal from China by picking this old and trusted hand?
Mysterious are the ways not only of the Lord, but mysterious are the ways of China when it comes to governance. Why was the former Chinese foreign minister removed? Nobody knows. He was brought in, I think, in December, and after a few months, he was dropped. All we do is what I call post ipso facto analysis. The new man actually was more powerful than the foreign minister because he was a member of the Politburo and he was what the Chinese call Chinese Secretary for Party Affairs for foreign policy, a post that was more powerful than that of the foreign minister. Of course, he's now going to hold both posts. I don't think it's going to have any impact on American Chinese policy. The reason being, what I've already stated, that even in his previous posting, he was more powerful than the foreign minister. And he was in a position as a member of the Politburo to influence foreign policy. Now that he's holding both posts, what kind of signal are the Chinese sending to the rest of the world? It's possible. As I said again, trying to decipher policy in China is like trying to peel onions. You peel the first one, and there's another ring there. It's not like peeling apple, where once you've got rid of the back peel, you can sink your teeth into the main body of the apple. Is it possible that there was starting to be confusion, resistance between the former foreign minister and the president and the new one? I have no idea, because differences of opinion in China are never played out in the social media or in the newspaper or on television. Maybe within the Politburo, debate will take place, differences will be ironed out, but once the decision is taken, that is it. Nobody goes out to say, I wasn't consulted or I disagree. That is Western democracy style. It's not Chinese or even the old Soviet Union. Also, it never used to be the style. It's only when somebody gets removed that you know a point of view has been lost out. But since you don't know what the point of differences are, you can't say who's won until probably several years later, when you now look back and there is sufficient evidence for you to say, this is really what happened. But right now, we can't, I mean, any speculation on whether the new foreign minister would lead to a softening or a hardening of the Chinese policy towards the United States would be reading too much personality into policy, which really doesn't take place in the Chinese system.
Thank you for that, sir. There's a comment here I want to read out, but before that, I want to thank Latif A. Bakari for the first question or comment before Ambassador Ogali. But this next one is from Dr. Dapo Thomas, where he said the summit in Russia should have been put off because of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Putin deliberately decided to hold the summit to shore up muscles for his bruised ego in the international arena. The way he was gallivanting during the meeting showed that he was more concerned about the glamour of being surrounded by the African leaders in attendance. And the way CNN was reporting the summit to the world, it was a PR summit for Putin and a kind of charity trip for the 6 countries he promised to give grain. Honestly, it was shameful for African leaders. I think he's agreeing with the comment you've made, sir, on that point. There's another comment here from Wazir on the Mali-France issue. The recent developments in Mali, especially the removal of the French as the official language that came on the back of kicking French troops out and banning France 24/7 TV, has been received in some quarters with jubilation. I would like to know your take on how this might re-energize anti-French nationalist policies among the West African francophonies, and how France and the West may react in other areas with possible neo-Russian influence in mind. And that's from Wazir Mutala.
He's put his fingers on the button and he's accurately identified the trend that is going on in Mali. I would expect that there will be similar developments in Burkina Faso, and probably similar developments in Central African Republic. That is provided Mali gets away with this, what I would call revolutionary policies. And they are revolutionary within the context of post-colonial French policies in the Sahel. What I will want us to monitor is the French reaction in the Sahel, because what has intrigued me is what the people in the Sahel had been complaining about. French forces have been there for 60-something years, and yet actions by the Tuaregs, actions by the jihadists have been going on. They have not been defeated, even by French forces. The only time when one saw effective French intervention was when the Tuaregs were almost knocking on the doors of Bamako, the capital of Mali. Then the French sent in forces, air, ground, and then drove the Tuareg back to their bases in the desert. Now, the question I raised, and this was in agreement with the Malians, is why did the French stop there? If you're going to protect Mali from Tuareg insurrection, you won't stop with just driving them back into their bases. You will actually chase them out of their bases. But you drove them back to their bases and you stopped there, which means that the government of Mali will constantly have to look or go to bed with one eye closed, because at any time when it pleases France, the Tuareg liberation movement could be activated to again come and destabilize Mali. So I don't think, this is my personal belief, of course, but I don't believe that France has actually given up on its own processes in the Sahel. I don't think France has given up on that. For reasons dealing with the Ukrainian war, or maybe, again, domestic politics, France might have had its attention diverted, because really in the past 2 years, there have been all these demonstrations and burning and looting and riots in France itself. That might have diverted attention for the meantime. But I think we should try to keep an eye open and monitor French direct or indirect activities in the Sahel. And it will be interesting to see what French attitude to the coup in Niger, what its action is. And this action, because there are French troops and French presence, and even US presence in Chad. Let's keep an eye again on the movement of those based in Chad, Western presence in Chad.
There's another comment here from Ambassador Gali, and I'll come back to the question from Omid J.K. Kelvin. So please hold on with me, Kelvin, there. The point from Ambassador Gali, sir, is that earlier today, President Thabo Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki, delivered a lecture on democratic governance and foreign policy in Africa. And he canvassed that African states must align their foreign policies by promoting overall regional economic development in Africa. And he wants to know your comment on that, sir.
Well, I thought that's what we're already doing. From the time of the OAU, there's been this understanding that there'll be regional institutional development, and that there'll be coordination of policies within these regional bodies, whether it's SADC or ECOWAS or what have you, and that they've been working on this. And each region, incidentally, has resisted attempts by actors from other regions to project its power outside that region. And I'm talking about when South Africa under Thabo Mbeki tried to intervene in Cote d'Ivoire during the struggle between Ouattara and Gbagbo. And Obasanjo had to, if you like, slap Thabo Mbeki on the wrist, that was beyond the reach of South Africa. Now, if what President Mbeki meant in that lecture was that the time was now right for a coordination of policies, political, foreign, economic, amongst regions now. Again, I thought that was what the AU is supposed to be doing. And the last midterm summit in Nairobi by the AU regional bodies, etc., I think precisely focused on the development of, pan-African institutions with emphasis on the African Free Trade Area, the consolidation of that convention, and making sure that it is really activated, so it doesn't just it doesn't remain just a paper convention. But really, no one can oppose what Thabo Mbeki was talking about. It will be good for Africa, because we can't have Africa speaking with discordant voices. We can't. Earlier on, we talked about, 17 African leaders turning up, while others, either turned up at various levels now, if the AU, and I think I made mention of it, that the AU should take a decision to debate this, so that you don't have 17 turning up unless it is AU's decision. And when we talk about AU decision, we are saying it's a unanimous decision by leaders that, okay, 17 will go to Moscow this time, but next year, Moscow will come to Africa. If we get an invitation from Kyrgyzstan, okay, 5 will go. And then next year, Kyrgyzstan will come to Africa. I said this, in answer to an earlier, in answer to my criticism of the presence of African leaders at the African-Russian summit. So if Ambassador Igali thinks my interpretation of Thabo Mbeki's proposal is misleading, please let him come back to us and make a contribution to correct me or modify what I've said.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. There's a comment here which I've not been able to validate, so might be something that we'll take away and bring back next week from Omoje Kelvin, which says we're going to secure a direct seaport diplomatically or by force. And it's a comment attributed to the Ethiopian Prime Minister during an investment summit. And he wants to know if it's a threat or an expression of interest. But we've not been able to validate that. So maybe we come back to that point next week, sir.
No, he's right. He's right. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia made that comment in terms of its search for a port. Once Eritrea became independent, Ethiopia became landlocked. and there have been these moves for Ethiopia and Eritrea to enter into negotiation so that Ethiopia could have a port in Eritrea, access to the Eritrean port. And that was where the Ethiopian Prime Minister said, we are going to get a port, either by negotiation or by force. I think that is an unwarranted bravado. You can't by force acquire a port in another country. Each country has its own sovereignty. You negotiate a passage to that port, and you pay whatever price that you can afford to pay. But to say you will take it by force, I think it's just unnecessary bravado.
I want to end on one question in the Middle East, sir, for tonight. If you actually, maybe we close, I'll bring it back next week. And it's about Doha, because I just realized we're 20 minutes over. And it's about Doha and the rise of Doha as a foreign policy base to be dealing with the Taliban meeting the US in Doha, and French also trying to get into a trade agreement in Doha as well. So I will bring that next week, sir, and end the program tonight. Thank you, everyone. Good night. We'll be back same time next week. Thank you.